Right, Tony Blair, here we go. Do you remember the last time I interviewed you?
No. Was it very memorable?
It was 1994 on breakfast television when you were running to be leader of the Labour Party. And my first question was, do you think you're tough enough for what lies ahead?
And well, I suppose I had to say yes. You could hardly say no to that question.
You did say yes, yeah. But what, are you exactly the same person now as you were then?
No, you're not. You're never the same person because you learn. I think you're the same intrinsically.
So have you changed? How have you changed since 1994?
Because I've, gone through 3 years of being leader of the opposition and 10 years of being prime minister, and then, 10 years out in the world. So you change because you're learning all the time.
But do you think fundamentally you're the same person?
I think I'm fundamentally the same person. Yeah, I've still got the same values and still got the same hopes. I'm still basically optimistic, and still very committed.
How hard has it been to go from being very popular, particularly in 1997, to somewhat toxic and in some parts of the world hated?
Yeah, it's hard because it's all about coming to terms with the fact that when you're running for power, you can be all things to all people. But when you actually achieve power, you've got to make decisions. And when that happens, in the process of government is your life, then yeah, you become much less popular.
But when you left, when you stopped being Prime Minister, you're the only Prime Minister ever who left the House of Commons to a standing ovation right across the piece. So actually the sort of toxicity, it's followed that as opposed to happening. I mean, I know there was a lot of that during that time, but it's got worse since you left.
No, the only difference is, I have had people attacking me all the way through I was being Prime Minister, and then particularly, post-2003, obviously, the decision on Iraq, but all the way through that latter period of government. I mean, papers like the Daily Mail started around 2001. And, then after I left, when I was in office, I was still out there answering.
Right. So why did you stop doing that when you left? Was that to help Gordon?
No, but because, you're then, you're no longer in office.
But Bill Clinton never stopped communicating, did he? And you did seem to me to take a strategic decision just to kind of get out of it, and then you allowed others to define who and what you are.
Yes, that was definitely a mistake, because the truth is, if you read what I've been doing the last 10 years, you think I've just been going around the world making money, when in fact I've spent the vast bulk of my time either in the Middle East or in Africa, or doing the things I really believe in and concentrate on. And now in this new period of my life, I've got to rectify that.
So why did you stop being political about it?
Because in a sense, I felt, there was no point in me trying to participate still in British politics.
Was that a mistake?
No, I don't.
Was that about letting Gordon get on with it?
Partly, certainly, but also because I wanted to get out. I felt the best contribution I could make was out in the world. So I started this initiative on Africa, which is, done great work and is doing great work in over 8 different African, in fact, it'll be probably soon 10 different African countries, with teams of people on the ground, helping make big change, helping these countries develop. The foundation that I started that was around religious coexistence and tolerance is now in 20 different countries. And even though it's been very tough in the Middle East, I've spent an enormous amount of time there. When I go back to Israel next week, it'll be my over 250th visit since leaving office. So, I had a belief that the best thing was for me to be out in the world and to do the things that I was doing. Now, the single biggest thing that comes upon you when you leave office is you lose the infrastructure. When you're prime minister or president, then the state provides the infrastructure. When you leave, you've got to build it. and you've got to finance it.
But do you still see yourself on that kind of level? Do you still see yourself as a sort of prime minister type figure?
No, I mean, I don't see myself like that, but I still see myself as very politically active and politically committed. I mean, I could have done what the parody of me was, which is go around the world and make money. That would have been the simple thing.
Do you accept the reputation sort of went south after you left?
Yes, I mean...
And how much of that do you think was about Iraq and how much was about money?
Both. But it was, I think, also because people didn't really know what I was actually doing.
And you just decided not to bother explaining for quite a long time?
I did explain, by the way, as much as I could. But
you didn't really?
Well, I did. But you don't have the same, you don't have the same instruments at your command. And, what I always say to people about a leave office is the thing you've got to understand when you leave office is you're no longer the first person in front of the microphone.
Yeah.
So you no longer shape the agenda. The agenda is shaped by others. And essentially, for example, in the Middle East, it is in many ways suited the next generation to say, well, look, all the problems are really because of those guys, because actually the decisions in relation to Syria or the Middle East more generally are incredibly difficult. Now, they're actually difficult for reasons that are as much to do with the Arab Spring and what happened in 2011 as anything we did, but it kind of, you got into this thing where people were saying, look, all these problems, they've all arisen because of your decisions. Who do you think
has done this post-power politics well? Be American or British or French or German? Who's done it well?
I think Bill Clinton did it well.
So, and are you surprised that George Bush has just sort of vanished and gone off to spend time with his paint?
Well, he hasn't really. He's actually, I think he's done it extremely well, by the way.
Because?
Because he has immersed himself actually he has a foundation and a library that does excellent work, not least in Africa. He works a lot with veterans, and that has become a big part of what he does. He has chosen not to go out into the world. And, what I decided to do was that I wanted to create an organization. I mean, we have 200 people employed, and, it's a big organization for someone to create on their own like that. And, as I say, the work we do is fantastic. So I haven't explained that properly. I think now that we're starting the new institute where we brought everything together and we're starting this new strain or new pillar of work, which is around what is the modern progressive agenda? How do we fight back against the populism left and right that distorts politics today? I think that will give me a better voice and a more natural political voice. And that's what I will, I'll spend a lot of time doing that.
And you have to keep earning loads of money to do that?
Well, you have to raise enough or make enough to be able to support it. Because, if you start employing 200 people, that's a big wage bill. And you need office premises and just about all the things that come with a big organisation.
About Bush, do you feel, given that on Iraq, the Americans provided 95% of the kind of military contribution, and we were relatively small, you seem to get more flack on Iraq than George Bush ever does?
Yes, but that's because I think the Americans take a different view. And I think there's a much more textured view of what is happening in the Middle East, the complexities of it, the difficulties of it, and there's at least a significant part of opinion there that would say, well, whatever the difficulties and the mistakes, we wouldn't be in a better place today if we'd left Sudan there.
And do you still believe that?
Yeah, I personally believe that. I mean,
do you never sit down and think, oh my God, why did we do that?
No, I don't think that, but I do and have always accepted responsibility for the failures on intelligence. We were given information that turned out not to be correct.
But that wasn't the only reason why we went
and for the failures of... No, well, it wasn't the only reason we went in. For the failures of planning, what I can never do, what people want me to do, is say it would have been better if it never had happened.
Right.
Because I don't accept that. I think when you look at the Middle East today, I mean, look, I'm out in the Middle East twice a month. I have a far greater knowledge than I used to have. The biggest reproach I make to myself all the time is that our knowledge of the depth of the religious, ethnic problems in the Middle East was inadequate and insufficient.
Well, that's quite a big admission, though.
It is a big admission, but I've admitted it many times. And so when people think, they think sometimes that I have no humility in relation to this. I have a huge amount of humility. The one thing I won't accept is that it's better that you leave these dictators in place, because it isn't, and what the Arab Spring shows you is it wouldn't work anyway. And the truth of the matter today in the Middle East, and that's one of the reasons I spend so much time on it, is that it's a struggle for religious tolerance and rule-based economies, and that is what the whole of the issue in the Middle East is about, and it's why we've got a massive strategic interest in supporting those modernizing elements in the Middle East, and there are many today.
But what about...
Because it will affect our own security ultimately.
Right, but so you never sort of lie awake at night thinking, oh, God, I wish to fuck we'd never done that.
I don't think that, but of course I go over constantly the decisions that were taken and the consequences of them, as you should do. But in the end, there is no point in me, and I always say to people, I'm really sorry if this is such a problem for you. You can't listen to anything I say, and I'm really sorry about that, deeply sorry. But I can't undo what I have done. It's
how did you feel?
We're now. This is 2017.
14 years on.
14 years on.
How did you feel at the unveiling of the Iraq-Afghanistan memorial when you had families saying that you shouldn't be there?
This is a situation. If I hadn't been there, people would have said it was.
No, I accept that.
I accept
totally
that.
Disrespectful. But how does that make you feel? That there was that amazing picture on the front of the Times of you. You sort of looked quite haunted that day.
They just take the picture.
No, I know that. But
you know how it works.
No, I do. But do you, when you hear a relative of somebody who's been killed in Iraq saying Tony Blair should
of course,
not be
I think
there,
it's very.
How does that make you feel?
It makes me feel sad for them and for the situation. But
how does it make you feel for you?
Yeah, but for me, it's the same. I mean, you look. You're never going to take a decision like that where you don't have people that feel very deeply about it. And if you lost your loved one and you decided that this was done on a false basis or a basis that leads you to question the integrity.
The war in Afghanistan is still going on.
Yeah, but I do get it. No, I do actually. You? Yes, you do.
Kosovo, you don't get it. Sierra Leone, you don't get it.
No, but we didn't take casualties in those conflicts. And
Kosovo?
No, Kosovo. I mean, there were, or there was a casualty in respect of Sierra Leone, but it's not of the same. Right. It's not of the same nature, and also what people feel. People have not yet come to a view about those conflicts that is, as it were, settled, right? And some people are settled in their view that it would be better if we never gone into these places. Now, that's not my view, but I understand the other point of view, and if you feel that very strongly.
Kosovo worked, Sierra Leone worked. People feel that Iraq hasn't. That's the basic problem. And they feel, and I know this is nonsense, but they feel that we lied about
yes, but you
the
can't,
case for war.
You can't, if someone, there have been now 6 different inquiries that have found that there was no deceit, there was a decision. If people are going to carry on saying, well, it was all lies, then there's nothing you can do about that. But let me just make the point, because it's really important. The reason why it was easier in Kosovo and Sierra Leone is that you didn't have in those conflicts the interference of radical Islamist ideology which you had in Iraq and Afghanistan and have today.
Is that something that we underestimated?
Yes, of course, and that's why I say the reproach I make is not often what people reproach me for. It is that we didn't at that point understand the depth of this Islamist question, and therefore, for example, what we thought was that if you removed the dictatorship and gave people the chance to elect their government, then they would do that, and the rest is the matter of reconstructing the country. Now, by the way, the people did have their election, and they did decide that they wanted a free country.
But we were,
and then
but
we
is,
had
but
no, but hang on. Then we had the interference in the case of Iraq from Iran on the one side and from Sunni extremism on the other, and that is what destabilized the country.
I remember at the time you used to be worried about this kind of hornet's nest argument.
Yes.
So you were worried about it. So do you accept that, as it were, we prodded the hornet's nest without really knowing what the consequences might be? And so therefore, was that still the right thing to do?
No, we underestimated the consequence of what happened when you removed the dictatorship. The only thing I say is what the Arab Spring teaches you is that all of these dictatorships were going to come under pressure and be toppled in the end,
right,
which is what's happened.
So Assad, what are the lessons then from that to what's happening, say, now in Egypt and in Syria?
Well, so when the Arab Spring began, what I said to people was, be very careful, because you've been through a situation in Iraq and in Afghanistan where you've removed the dictatorship, but then the problems begin. So if you can evolve a transition, do that. So my view was, in respect of Syria and in respect of Libya, it would have been better to have agreed a process of transition. So if you could have cut a deal, which I think it was possible maybe to have done with Gaddafi to get a transition, it would have been better, likewise with Assad. Now, then having said you wanted them to go, then you had to go and get them out.
Right, okay.
And the problem with what we've done in Syria is that we've insisted that he go, but not actually make him go. And the inevitability, therefore, of a civil war as a result of that was, I'm afraid, to me, very clear. He was going to fight to stay, and then what happened was the Russians, the Iranians came in on his side and propped him up. But there is no, what has happened in Syria is, in my view, a hideous blot on Western foreign policy. This is
Obama, Cameron, et al. Have to take some responsibility.
Well, I'm not going to start allocating responsibility because I know what it's like to take these decisions. But the fact is, in Syria, and this is why I say, if you had left Saddam in place in Iraq, you would have had exactly the same problem. The Arab Spring would not have stopped at the borders of Syria. It would have gone to Iraq for sure. None of these dictators were removed in the period between 2003 and 2011. All of them were either removed or came under pressure, as in Yemen and Syria, and it would have happened in Iraq. And indeed, in my view, there is a case for saying you would have had a much worse situation, because in Syria you had essentially a Shia-backed minority keeping out a Sunni majority, and in Iraq you had a Sunni minority keeping out a Shia majority.
Okay, as you know, unlike you, I see a psychiatrist regularly for my madness, and I have.
So, if you ask for your money back,
I have two recurring dreams that in one of them, you and Gordon are trying to kill each other, and I have to try and resolve it. And I do have a recurring dream about soldiers being blown up, okay, which may be about my brother, having been a soldier, but it may also be about Iraq and the sort of impact that's had on me as well. Do you dream about it?
No.
So what do you dream about?
Lots of different things. That
You don't dream about stuff that you might think, I'm being prodded there about Iraq.
I think about these things a lot, of course. But I also think, you've got, if you're going to be Prime Minister of the country, and I think it's really important people understand this, your job is to take the decisions that you think are right for the country. That's your responsibility. Right? And the moment you shy away from taking those decisions because you think you're going to get criticised and attacked, life may be easier, but you are failing in the principal responsibility of the leader, which is to take the decisions. And, so I took a decision post 9/11 that we should be with America, that we were going to be with America, that this was important for global security. And I also took a very strong view about this extremism and how we had to deal with it. Now, I may have been wrong, but I did what I thought was right. And that's my responsibility. So I don't, as it were, agonize over having taken the decision, because I know what I did was what I thought was right.
Right.
Of course, you agonize over the
dream about
consequence. That's my business and
well,
not
yeah,
your
but
business.
No.
Even though I love you, I'm not. You go back and get back on the couch with you.
Okay. No, we just do it sitting like this. We just sit like this.
Right.
Trump.
Without a camera, maybe.
Trump. I dreamt about Trump the other night. Actually, told me to stop playing my bagpipes. I told him to fuck off. Trump makes Bush look like a sort of genius, doesn't he?
Look, I have to work with American administration, American presidents.
You don't have to.
I do, because I'm doing the Middle East.
Right, but
and it's extremely important to me. And so I'm not getting into a situation of slagging off the American president. It's not what I've done so far in my life, and I'm not going to do it.
But you know, people are entitled to know what you think about things.
Well, I don't know that they're entitled to know.
Okay,
they're
right.
entitled to
I'm
ask.
entitled to know.
I don't think you're entitled to know either.
I want to know that you can't work with Trump. You cannot work with Trump.
Look,
if Trump phoned you up now and asked you to do the job that the quartet asked you to do, for example, if Trump asked you to do that, would you do it?
No, I've made it clear. Not merely have I not asked for a job. That was just one of these classic sort of male inventions.
Fake news.
Right. And I don't want that, because what I do in the Middle East, I do independently, and it's very important to me to keep my independence, because it gives me a relationship with the key players, Israelis and Arabs, because my view is that the whole way you're going to get a peace agreement today is through Israelis and Arabs working together on this, and not just Israelis and Palestinians.
He comes along and says that two-state solutions all nonsense.
Well, he hasn't said that, actually.
What's he said? What's his view then?
No, their view is actually a very traditional American view. There should be two states, and
so
the
why
Palestinian
did he say
state.
what he said? He did say that.
No, he said what he said in the press conference. In the press conference,
right.
Actually. But the fact is, the Americans are operating on the basis of the two-state solution.
So you don't share my sort of terror that this guy's the president of America, and that actually the comparisons with Hitler and Stalin are not terribly overdone. That this took Hitler a long time to go for the journalists and the judges. It took him about a week.
No, the comparisons with Hitler and Stalin are ridiculous.
Right?
No, I'm sorry. Yes, okay. They are ridiculous. However, as I said, I think openly during the campaign, I would have backed Hillary. Right. So that's where I am, and you can assume from what I think and what I believe what my views are. But for me, because I'm working on this issue, so I will judge them on what they actually do.
Right, but your connection with the Trump administration, you met Jared,
mm-hmm.
And that was just about the Middle East, or was that sort of just right? Okay, and so your connection with them is that you are going to stay active in the Middle East peace process, and therefore you want to work with them on that. But if he actually said, you know, I quite like that Tony Blair guy, he seems to know who he's up to.
Well, I don't think he
might
particularly has said that or would say that.
But do you not think it's a problem that, you know, I mean, look, we alluded to this, we got accused of lying the whole time even though we didn't, but this guy does lie all the time. Yeah, but
Alistair, I don't want to, I've got enough issues, you know, when you're me, you've got to choose the issues you want to get into. Right. Now, there is, one of the reasons I'm doing this whole new strain of work is to push back against the rightist populism, some of which obviously was as echoes in the campaign that brought him to power.
And the government.
However, for me, I'll judge him on what actually happens, and
but do you think it's a
America, for me in the Middle East, I'm going to carry on working.
Okay, but America is like, we may have the so-called mother of all parliaments, which is being so useless on Brexit, but America is like the most powerful democracy in the world, and it's now at its head got somebody who is, you know, a liar, a misogynist, racist, sexist. That's quite tricky, and if you're in positions of leadership, I think people should sort of call that out.
Yeah, well, where there are things I profoundly disagree with, I will and have.
Right. So what's he done since he became president that you profoundly disagree with?
So, for example, when all that stuff on immigration happened, I was perfectly prepared to be critical of it. So I've not got a problem with doing that on individual issues. What I'm not going to do, because I actually think, A, let's see what really happens,
mm-hmm.
and B, I am engaged in something in which I'm going to cooperate with people in the administration.
Is there a part of you that thinks actually that Obama was not great for the Middle East and that Trump could be?
It's less the former than I think it's possible that if this administration goes down the path that I'm advocating, which is to build a strategic alliance in the Middle East, whose purpose is to fight extremism, whether of the Shia sort promoted by the theocracy in Iran or of the Sunni sort, I think if they decide to go down that path, that will be very productive. So whatever else is happening in the world and where you agree or disagree and whatever's happening in America, on the Middle East specifically, there is actually an opportunity. Now, look, I know because this is one of the situations you get into today where, you know, things become so polarized that if I'm with a group of Democrats in the US and I even suggest there might be an area in which the Trump administration could or you could do good, and people just go mental with you. But the reality is there is an alliance to be built in the Middle East today around the whole struggle over religious tolerance. And actually, if the Trump administration want to put themselves behind that, which they could.
But this Bannon guy basically thinks for America to reassert itself, you've got to wipe out, you've got to sort of bring China down. And on the religious front, sort of Christians are superior to Muslims, and that's...
Well, I don't know whether he thinks that or not, but I know that Tillerson, who's the Secretary of State, Mattis, who's the Secretary of Defense, and McMaster, who's the National Security Advisor, don't think that.
Right, so we're in a position basically where we've got to kind of hope these guys do the right thing because we're worried Trump might do the wrong thing.
No, I think we're just in a situation of saying, let's determine the character of this administration finally by what they do.
Okay. And when he sort of started that thing about, moving the embassy, and did you not think, oh my God, do these people know what they're doing?
Yeah, but I just point out to you, the embassy has not, in fact, moved.
All right, okay. Would you have I know you're not the Prime Minister, but were you Theresa May and he went on that first visit? I mean, did you not think that offering Trump a state visit when he's barely been elected was like an act of utter sycophancy and wait a minute, and an insult to Her Majesty the Queen, for whom we both have enormous fondness?
No, she's perfectly entitled to get alongside the American president.
Yeah, that's fine, but a state visit.
Oh, come on, Alistair.
What?
Well, now you're sort of elevating this. I mean,
no, but
really.
Seriously, a state visit is a major diplomatic chip. And we don't have many at the moment.
Yeah,
This
okay.
is, with him, gold carriage with the Queen down the Mall.
Yeah, I know, but...
Oh, apparently it's going to be in Aberdeen now, because nobody wants him to come here.
Look, are we talking about my prejudices or your prejudices?
I want to know what you think.
Look, what I think is...
we would not have sat down and said, right, new president, not sure about him, state visit. We wouldn't have done that.
Come on.
We wouldn't.
No, Alistair, honestly.
Well,
when George Bush came in, we made every effort to get alongside him straight away.
Absolutely.
Right, so come on.
Based on values.
Yeah, but also based on the fact he was president of the United States. Come on.
So
we thought Al Gore was going to win the election, if you remember.
Yes, I do.
Right, so...
Right.
And, by the way, there were people who were horrified at the prospect of George...
you would have probably gone along and given Donald Trump a state visit.
Well, I have no idea whether I would offer him a state visit, but I'm not going to criticise her for getting alongside the American president, and I think she's entitled to do that. And in any event, it's important the British Prime Minister and the American president have a good relationship.
Okay. Do you remember our very first meeting with Vladimir Putin? Do you remember what you said after it?
You see, because you keep these damn diaries, you remember all these things.
I don't remember.
I remember the first time.
It.
I think we went to, actually the first time I met Vladimir Putin.
First time he came to Downing Street before he was president, and as he left, you said, "I think he's going to be okay."
Yes.
Stand by that judgment.
I stand by the judgment at the time because actually at that point it was very clear he wanted to point westward. I remember our first meeting in St. Petersburg, which was immensely successful.
But it's been a bit of a disaster, hasn't it?
Well, I don't...
Are you going to defend him as well now?
No, I'm not going to do...
Trump's good, Putin's good.
I didn't say that.
Assad, leave him alone. So Putin.
So, no, of course I don't.
Good for the world, bad for the world?
I think this resurgent Russian nationalism, I understand it. I understand what motivates it. I'm not sure we have always... In fact, I'm sure we haven't always made the right overtures to try and bring Russia on side with us. But I don't approve of the things they're doing in Syria or Ukraine, of course.
And what about interfering in American elections?
Yeah, well, if they...
And the French elections and the German elections and our referendum?
I think this is completely concur with those people who think this is a big challenge for us.
And why do you think Trump doesn't sort of join in that concurrence? He seems to rather...
We've done the
Yes,
Trump business.
No, but why?
Get off Trump and get back onto whatever.
Onto Putin.
Yeah.
But your institute, as you said, is in part a response to Trump politics.
Well, it is partly a response to the politics that brought him to power, the politics that gave us Brexit, and also to this notion that type of authoritarian populism that's represented by the kind of Putinist concept of leadership.
And which Trump wants to follow.
Well, I don't know whether he wants to follow that or not. I sincerely hope not, but
he does.
I don't think
he's jealous of Trump, isn't he? He's jealous of Putin. He is. He's jealous of Putin. He's got his parliament. He's got his media. You don't agree with me? You don't think he actually looks at Putin and thinks, "I want to be that guy. I want to have that power."
I've no idea, but in any event, it's not possible in America.
No, well, let's hope not. Let's hope not.
No, I think not for sure.
Okay.
And the real issue for Russia in the end is can it find its way to make the reforms to its economy that can strengthen the country and give it a power that is in the end going to be going to grow because it's based, because all power ultimately, you're never going to end up with a country that's a huge power without its economy being in good shape.
Right.
I mean, why is China so much more powerful today? Because they reformed their economy.
Do you think
and
we're
opened
slightly,
it up.
because we're all focusing so much on Russia at the moment, whose economy actually isn't in great shape, do you think we're slightly missing the main picture with Trump? That actually the big thing is going to be Trump's relations with China.
Oh, absolutely. The big thing is going to be Trump's relationship with China, and actually it could be good. The American relationship with China, I think most people haven't caught up to the fact that this is the most important relationship of the 21st century, for sure.
Yeah. So Putin is a bit of a sideshow.
Well, he's not a sideshow because I think it's very important that China itself develops and evolves in a way politically and economically which is not based on the Putin model.
Right. And Trump, I know we've done Trump. Wait a minute. No,
let's do him again.
No, all right. The Putin, have you read that book by that guy Pomerantsev, Nothing is True and Anything is Possible, which is about Russia? But actually this whole fake news thing and the way that Trump is kind of handling the media, it's about trying to do that. He's trying to delegitimize any source of information other than himself and his ridiculous Twitter feed, which Putin has done by kind of throwing people in jail and invading countries and saying you haven't invaded them, blowing up planes and saying you didn't, and killing people on the streets of London and saying you haven't.
Yeah, but I think it is different in a very crucial way, actually. I mean, look, I think and so do you, I think there's a major problem with the way the media operates in the West, which is becoming polarized and partisan, and, you know, not everything Trump says about his media coverage is unfair.
Not everything, but he goes beyond anything.
Yeah, no, I agree he goes beyond it, but I think we've got to be very clear. You know, the left media finds it very hard to be objective on Trump. Now, my point is different. My point is the right-wing media is brutal towards progressive politicians. Mm-hmm. And so, in other words, you've actually got a media today that is completely partisan.
Right, but the right lie more than the left, in general, I think.
The Daily
Mail and the Daily Telegraph are worse than the Guardian and the Mirror.
They are far more brutal
Fox
and
is worse
aggressive.
than CNN.
They are far more brutal and aggressive, but the fact is it doesn't actually help our cause to be partisan precisely for the reason you give, because in the end what happens is that they are so much more brutal at it and aggressive at it than we are. And the trouble with progressive politics always is that we are perfectly happy to turn on our own, where they basically defend their positions very strongly.
Okay. How are we going to stop this ridiculous Brexit thing?
What we've got to do is to mount an effective, coordinated campaign that has a very, very simple message at the heart of it.
And that is stop Brexit. It's not mess around with it. It's not sort of soft hard. It's actually, this thing is wrong. It's bad for the country. Therefore, we have to do all we can to try and
it's
stop
at this moment to say the option of changing your mind is open to you, right? And don't let anyone tell you it isn't. Because what the right-wing media cartel and the government are trying to do is to create a sense not just of inevitability, but of the impropriety of even discussing what should happen when we don't yet know the terms, and when it's clear that when Theresa May said Brexit means Brexit, she actually means Brexit at any cost, in whatever circumstances. Yeah. And we now have this extraordinary situation in which we're saying we're going to become a great global trading nation, and we're going to start by withdrawing from the biggest global trading market right on our doorstep. And we're now trying to advocate for, say, much greater defence and security cooperation within Europe, which is a perfectly good thing, but somehow we should be getting closer to Europe on defence and security cooperation, and therefore, by the way, pooling our sovereignty. But when it comes to our economy, where already 50% of our trade is with Europe, we should be doing the opposite. I mean, it literally makes no sense.
So it is madness.
I mean, I personally think Brexit is a catastrophe for Britain. I deeply believe that, but I have to accept there's been a referendum. Right. But I know it's really important we phrase this in the right way, because the truth of the matter is, and this is why I've used the analogy of the house swap, and it's a good analogy. The fact is, we agreed that we were going to swap our house for another house. But this other house, the dispute about it is a dispute about claims at the moment. You know, we say it's going to be ugly, other people say it's beautiful. Okay. We're now going to get the chance to see, right? We're going to test it. We're going to see the neighbourhood. We're going to do the survey. We're going to go around it. We're going to look at it and see whether it really meets our needs or not. Our case has got to be very, very simple. It is that if we come to the conclusion that the gain is very slight, the pain is enormous, and actually, thanks to the concentration on Brexit, nothing else in the country is being done properly, we are entitled to change our mind.
Correct, right. But the 2 years, the inevitability in the 2 years, do you think we'll know? I mean, I agree with you. I think it's a catastrophe. I think it's going to be a disaster. But do you think we'll know that sufficient for people to say, yeah, this is not going to
Well, I think that's a very good question, and I'm not sure what the answer is.
And you can't have...
Because the risk is we only... Look, it's like the currency. The currency is, 15 to 20% down.
Yeah.
Now, that is not a market correction. That is a prediction by the international financial markets.
The economy's going to go tank.
Well, that we're going to be that much poorer.
Yeah.
Okay. Because that's why they have
and you barely read about it, you barely hear about it.
Right. Now, that will have an impact on living standards, because it'll have an impact on inflation, particularly with the poorest families and so on. I don't know whether this all becomes manifest, though. But I feel there is a good chance that it will do. And I also think the other thing that we've got to point out to people is one of the reasons the government just says Brexit means Brexit, and don't question any longer why we're doing this.
Because they're worried.
They're supremely worried that if you subject the claim that this is a good idea to analysis, what are you left with? You're left with EU migration,
both of them,
and the European Court of Justice. It is now absolutely clear that we want to keep the majority of these EU migrants, that we need them. So we're actually talking about stopping a very small number of people. So we're not even dealing with the immigration issue particularly. And on the European Court of Justice, I would defy most people to name a European Court of Justice decision they'd ever heard of.
Well, they think it's anyway.
And if we're going to have a free trade agreement with Europe, by the way, then we'll also have to have a disputes resolution procedure. And if that's not the European Court of Justice, it's going to be something that looks like it.
Right. Now, I know you're part of the sort of, international union of former presidents and prime ministers, and you don't like to criticise other members of that group. But do you not look at Theresa May and think, one, she fought Remain and now has gone hard Brexit, and two, she must know deep down that what she's doing is wrong for the future of Britain. And as a prime minister who on Iraq said you do what you think is the right thing, do you not look at that and just sort of feel a kind of certain contempt?
No, I don't.
Or is this my prejudice again?
No, it's not your prejudice. It's your opinion. You're entitled to it. I don't criticise.
But she's doing the wrong thing. She's doing the wrong thing.
Of course, I believe this is the wrong thing. But I'm not going to subject her to personal criticism. It's not a personal criticism. She inherited a situation where She believes it's her duty to deliver Brexit. She believes, and I understand why she believes this. She thinks, and these people think that if you reopen this debate, you're going to cause huge stresses and strains in the politics of the country.
But she's basically
by the way, I understand that.
She's being driven by a Tory right wing.
I understand that.
And the Mail.
Well, the problem is, if you had a vibrant opposition, then she would come under pressure from the centre and from the left as well as from the right. The trouble is, at the moment, she's really only under pressure from the right-wing media cartel, the Mail, the Sun, the Telegraph, the Express, who provided the ramp for pro-Brexit propaganda pre the campaign and post the campaign. Just Brexit is good, it's brilliant, it's going to make the country great, and no other news that might collide with that is ever published by them. So she's under pressure from that, and from the right wing of the Tory party, who say to her, look, if you reopen this, we're going to split the Tory party again.
Do you think if hard Brexit does go ahead, do you think it's likely that Scotland will become independent?
I don't know. I think it's very hard to judge. But I think the fact that Brexit clearly imposes a big strain on the Union, both in respect to Scotland and actually in respect of Northern Ireland, means that it imposes an even greater obligation on us only to do this if the gain is substantial and the pain is not. And the fact is, it's the other way around. So, on Northern
Ireland, I mean, I don't know about you, but I just find the extent to which Northern Ireland, I know you and Major went there, but the extent to which it barely figured during the campaign or since, at a time when in Ireland they are seriously worried about the impact, just shows we're in a kind of la-la land.
Well, the trouble with Northern Ireland is that, our generation remembers the peace process in Northern Ireland and knows how terrible it was and what
Theresa May ought to remember that.
A deep mark it left on British politics. But today's generation of people,
Theresa
it's not
May's
been
the
an
Prime
issue
Minister.
for 20 years. Yeah.
She went to Northern Ireland and left the distinct impression she hadn't even given it much thought.
Well, I don't know whether she did that or not, but the fact is it's a very difficult thing to work out, how you have a hard border with the EU, which is now going to be the border in Northern Ireland. And remember, when we're talking about trade, we have more trade with Ireland than we do with India or...
Balmy, the whole thing's balmy.
Cameron
should never have had the referendum?
Look, in the course of the last election campaign, and this is what shows you how strange the situation is we're in. I think I was the only person who made a speech on Europe in the course of the 2015 election campaign, precisely to warn that the referendum was not a good idea. But, look, I understand why he felt he had to do that, and, to be fair to him, he campaigned very hard in the referendum for the right result. So.
Do you ever dream about Gordon?
Oh, for God's sake, Alistair, get off the damn dreaming thing.
Do you ever dream about Gordon?
No, I'm not.
That's a lie. You must dream about Gordon.
You obviously have a problem with your dreams.
Don't.
Go. I'm not your shrink.
Okay. So you've never dreamt about Gordon. I know you've dreamt about Gordon because you've told me about dreams about Gordon. I think some of them are in the diaries. Volume 7. When was the last time you spoke to Gordon?
A short time ago, actually. What were you doing? I think Scotland, British politics.
You just bump into him at...
Yeah, we see each other.
When was the last time you spoke to Corbyn?
I don't know. That's some time ago, I guess.
Has he ever phoned you up and said, Tony, you just used to do this job, got any tips?
No, but, why should he?
Well, because you've done the job.
Yeah, but, we obviously disagree strongly about the direction of the Labour Party.
Do you think there's any chance ever that Jeremy Corbyn will be Prime Minister of the United Kingdom?
I think we've got to pass on that one.
So that's a no?
No, it's not a no. It's, how do I answer this without just getting into a whole heap of Blair attacks Corbyn?
Did you see, by the way, there was a survey yesterday that 2% of people think that Blair is not a Blairite. That was good. But there is a
Look, it's no great secret that I obviously think the Labour Party's gone in profoundly the wrong direction since I left in 2007.
Right, but is there a danger?
So,
But right, at the moment, the way that the people talk is that I keep hearing, oh, well, we're just going to have to lose an election and then rebuild. But we might lose an election and get wiped out.
Oh, no, it's a big mistake to think that, yes.
So we could get, we could be seeing the end of the Labour Party.
Well,
as a serious, credible political force.
I don't know, but what I am very, very clear about is two things. Number one, if people think you can just go into the next election, lose it heavily, and come out and rebuild, there may be no bottom to this market. So this is a very, very dangerous course indeed. Yeah. And secondly, because of Brexit, it's a betrayal of our duty to the country if we're not offering a competitive opposition. I mean, we've got to do that. So, look, I don't... My desire is for the Labour Party to recover itself. I mean, I'm not going to get into attacking Jeremy Corbyn as the leader of the Labour Party. I mean, you know, people understand whether I think this was a good idea or not. I said before the leadership election I thought it wasn't, but I don't want to start attacking him because actually I think this has gone beyond being about him. This is about a direction of the Labour Party. If the Labour Party is going to win power again, it's got to own the future.
Right. Do you think...
that's how it's always won.
Okay, but right, politics is a continuum. I did a piece for GQ a few weeks ago about Corbyn, and in it I said, there is part of it that thinks, well, Tony begat Gordon, begat Ed, begat Jeremy. Do you think there's something in that? Do you think we sort of started this?
No, because I think we were always very clear about our own position.
But we paved the way for Gordon, who changed a bit, and then Ed came in, who changed a bit more.
But Gordon was in a supremely strong position to become the leader of the Labour Party. So, I think rather than go back over the personalities of it, there's a much, much bigger question, which is about the future of progressive politics.
Right.
And I think the progressive political position only wins when it builds out from the centre and when it has policies designed for the future.
But that's being rejected.
And it has been rejected in the Labour Party, and we can see the result. We lost in 2010. We lost even bigger in 2015.
In 2020.
And now we're
15
points adrift in the middle of a Tory government, losing safe Labour seats to the Tories. So, you know, the one thing I find really weird about the present situation is when people who are presently running things ascribe their defeats to those of us who won victories.
It's quite bizarre.
I mean, but all I can say to people in the Labour Party is if you want to get back into a position of being a competitive opposition with a chance of winning power, you've got to go back to the centre definitively and clearly, and you've got to have policies that address the future. And this is the... You know, it's
so
like,
you're not arguing for a return to New Labour?
New Labour, you've got to demystify New Labour. All New Labour was...
Do you not think the centre is being rejected?
No, I don't think the centre is rejected by the people.
Right.
I mean, I think, look, in 2015, Cameron won from essentially a centre-right position. You know, if you look...
So when you say, you keep saying this thing about, right, if we go into the next election with a hard Brexit Tory, I think actually quite hard, out-UKIPing UKIP, Tory leader, and a hard left leader, you've got millions of people who are politically homeless. Surely the logical conclusion of that is that what's happening, the churn in politics at the moment, can only be broken now by some sort of new political force emerging. Or is that too difficult because of our system?
I think it's extremely difficult. Or the old political forces reasserting their...
But that's just not happening inside the Labour Party at the moment.
No, it's not. But
and people like you and me are sort of opting out of that and devoting our energies to Brexit because we feel at least that's maybe got a chance, even though that's
also because it's the most urgent thing facing the country. And one of the things what the Labour Party's got to understand about the present situation is that when you've got something as critical as Brexit happening, the country, and millions of people out there, are expecting us to lead.
So could there be a place for I mean, the Lib Dems, I know, have got a very clear position. The SNP have got a clear position. Could there be a case for a new pro-European party that fights the next election just on that? The next election, not the one after, the next election.
No, I think it's incredibly difficult to start something new.
But then we're fucked.
British
politics.
Then
we're doomed.
I still think and
We're
hope.
doomed on Brexit, and we're doomed. Labour Party's dead.
No, I don't. I'm never. I'm never. We're all doomed.
We're quite doomed. Feels quite doomed.
It's challenging. Yeah, it's challenging.
Do you
Although
feel-
I think you can build a movement in the country that holds the government to account
On Brexit.
On Brexit.
Right. Okay. Do you feel you have more in common with Jeremy Corbyn or Nick Clegg?
Not getting into those questions
Clegg.
because they're too
Do you
difficult.
think you have more in
they're
common
too
with-
difficult
Do you think you have more in common?
for me to answer without
that's
getting
Clegg.
into a situation where I mean.
But Clegg, it's Clegg. Have you seen Clegg? Does Clegg ever phone you up and say, let's have a chat about this, that and the other? In a way that Jeremy doesn't.
No, I discuss Europe with him from time to time, and I admire
Tim
what he's doing
Farron?
on
Do you have
Europe.
more in common with Tim Farron than Clegg? Than Corbyn?
Now, I'm not getting into all the
Sturgeon?
personality.
More common with
bits.
Sturgeon? What do you think of Nicola?
I think she's a very effective politician.
What do you think about her basic argument that Brexit has totally fundamentally changed the debate on Scotland and Scotland now should have another vote?
Look, I think it is a change, and I don't think you can, people in the Labour Party were angry with me when I have said it's a material change in the situation. But as I said to them, look, I can hardly go through the referendum campaign saying if you vote Brexit, it's going to be a problem for the union, and then afterwards say, no, it's really not a problem at all. I mean, we should leave that to the Leave campaigners. But but having said that, I do not think independence is sensible for Scotland, even if Brexit happens. And
But
I
if
do
there was
not
a
think
way,
it's the case
if
for
there was a
another
way,
referendum.
if you were Scottish, well, you kind of are, you were born in Scotland. If you were Scottish and you saw a way of Scotland independent, I know it's difficult, staying as a member of the European Union, and rather than being part of this Brexited UK, is that not a very, very attractive option if you're Scottish?
I still think...
Even with all the obstacles?
No, I still think it's better for Scotland to remain part of Britain.
Even out of Europe? Which you think is going to be a catastrophe?
Yeah, because I think in the end, the union between England and Scotland is so important. But having said that, today, with Britain in Europe, you can be Scottish, British and European.
Exactly.
After Brexit, you can be two of those things, but not all three of them.
Yeah.
So that's the tragedy of it.
Paul Dacre, force for good or bad in the world?
And I think the politics that he drives through the Daily Mail is very damaging for Britain.
Rupert Murdoch, force for good or force for bad?
So I disagree with him on politics too.
Murdoch.
Yeah.
So did we get too close to Murdoch?
Well, you know why we did get close. We got close because we'd been absolutely savaged by the media throughout the 80s and the early 90s.
But we kept it on for quite a long time. You
yes.
only really fell out with Murdoch when he started, getting
yeah, but
angry
it's
about Wendy.
it's a different look. I mean,
Who's
I'm
the
the
worst
person.
of those two?
No,
Dacre and
I'm
Murdoch?
not getting into that.
Dacre and Murdoch.
No.
What?
I am. I have changed my view about the media because of
You come to my
Brexit. No one could ever be quite as
So just admit it.
jihadist on the subject
Mail
as,
watch.
as oh, please
Mail
not Mail
watch.
Watch.
Admit you made a mistake.
No.
You did. You stopped me
No, we
doing
were the government,
daily
Alistair.
rebuttal.
We were the
Yeah,
government.
We were the government,
Right.
but
Anyway,
Trump's the government.
let me make my point about the media.
Right. Make your point.
Okay. Which is that I think their activities in Brexit changed the dynamic of their relationship to politics. Hang
They've
on.
been doing it for years.
No, they have. But this is a decision that changed the whole course of our country's history.
But it only happened because of
And-
the way they cover politics, up to for a decade or more.
Are you going to allow me to finish what I'm saying? So, whatever issues I have with the media and the way that increasingly over time newspapers have become the playthings of a small group of very powerful individuals, my view is they crossed the line when they operated like a cartel in respect to Brexit.
But we allowed them to.
No, hang on a minute. We didn't allow them to do this, where they were coordinating
But we
and
gave them
boosting.
the space and the oxygen and the power that got them that access,
Yeah,
that influence on our debate.
Okay, you can debate about the history. I'm debating about what it is now. And what I'm saying is that I think they crossed the line at that point, for me. And, to have this small group of individuals who control the press, who, on the right, who provided that ramp for the propaganda and who provide the vilification of anybody who dares oppose that now, when it's not a decision of these newspapers, like as if they're institutions. This is a decision of individuals, right? These individuals control these papers.
Murdoch,
they wouldn't
Dacre,
be taking.
Barclays, Desmond.
They wouldn't be taking these decisions, these papers, unless they were instructed to do so. And I think that's a line that they've stepped over.
Right, and nothing's
and
now
therefore,
happening about it.
Whereas I, for ages and ages and ages have not sort of criticised them openly, I'm sorry, this is not on. You have put yourself in a different position in relation to the democracy of the country. Especially given many of them don't actually live and pay taxes in this country. And I think that is got to be an issue.
So I was right, Tony. What did I tell you? What was right? When I tried to get you to do this 10 years ago, I was right. But you didn't do it because you were too close to them. We were too close to them.
That wasn't the reason. It's also because, look, I'll be frank with you. It's partly because,
It's easier in power to keep them on board.
No, it's also because when you go and fight them, when you're in my position, not in your position, it's a full-on fight because these people have come after you with everything they've got. I mean, they're like a mafia.
Do you have anything else you'd like to apologise to me or the nation for? Ruining my life? Any of that sort of thing? No?